In the world of tech M&A, there are a handful of deals that people just love to argue about. And Google's purchase of Motorola Mobility, it's right at the top of that list. On paper, it looks like one of the biggest screw-ups of the decade. But today, we're going to peel back the layers, look past those screaming headlines, and really analyze the strategy behind the numbers. Let's get into it.
So right off the bat, here's the number you always see, negative $9.59 billion. Google shells out $12.5 billion, then a couple of years later sells the main part of it for less than $3 billion. That's a nearly $10 billion hole on the balance sheet. I mean, it's a jaw-dropping number that just screams total failure, right? And look, that huge number is exactly why this deal is so fascinating for us as M&A professionals. It's the central question. Did one of the smartest companies on the planet just completely whiff on a massive acquisition? Or was this whole thing a brilliant multi-step chess move with a real goal that almost everyone completely missed? Now, this is the timeline the world saw. It's almost too simple. Buy high in 2011, sell low in 2014. It tells a really easy story of a big purchase and then what looks like a fire sale at a massive loss. And because that narrative is so simple and so dramatic, the real strategy was able to hide in plain sight. Okay, so to really get what's going on here, we have to throw that simple buy and sell story out the window. We need to rewind the clock to 2011 and really understand the absolutely brutal battlefield Google found itself on. This was about survival. The early 2010s, man, it wasn't just about who could build a cooler smartphone. It was a flat-out legal war. Steve Jobs had famously promised to go thermonuclear on Android for being a, quote, stolen product. And the weapon of choice in this war? Patents. This wasn't a small skirmish. This was an all-out war for who would own the future of mobile. And this table right here, it just lays out the stakes perfectly. While Google was building this amazing open-source Android platform, its biggest rivals, Apple and Microsoft, teamed up, and they spent $4.5 billion just to buy up thousands of patents from Nortel. This was a direct shot aimed right at Android, designed to bleed the entire ecosystem dry with lawsuits. Google was completely outgunned and totally exposed. And listen to this. This is from Google's own chief legal officer at the time. He's not mincing words. He's saying our entire ecosystem is under threat. This wasn't business as usual. This was a 5-alarm fire. They knew they had to make a big move, and they had to do it fast. So here's the big twist. When Google announced the Motorola deal, the public, the media, they all saw a bid for a tired, struggling phone maker. But for the folks in the M&A war room, the target was something else entirely. It was never about building phones. It was about building a fortress made of pure intellectual property. Okay, let's break down what Google really bought. Yeah, sure, the division that makes the phones was in there, but just look at that chart. The overwhelmingly massive slice of the pie was the 17,000 plus patents. This was a legal arsenal, a huge portfolio of IP that could be a massive deterrent. The hardware, you could say, was just the box that all came in. And hiding inside that giant portfolio, you had the crown jewels, a core set of about 18 patents that were so fundamental, so-called standard essential patents, that you basically couldn't build a modern smartphone without them. We're talking about things like antenna design, how the phone handles email, even basic 3G and 4G tech. This was the defensive shield Google desperately needed. And make no mistake, these weren't just theoretical weapons sitting in a drawer somewhere. Motorola had already put them to use. They had successfully sued BlackBerry's maker, RIM, and forced them to pay up. So Google wasn't just buying a shield. They were buying a sword that was already battle-tested. Okay, so once Google had its IP fortress built and the war started to cool down, it was time for phase 2. The sale to Lenovo, that wasn't Google waving the white flag. No way. It was the planned, perfectly logical final step of a highly successful mission. Now, pay close attention to this, because this is where it gets really smart. Look at what Lenovo got. The really tough, low-margin business of making and selling phones, plus a couple thousand patents to help them do it. But what did Google keep? The prize. The vast majority of that patent arsenal and the super innovative Advanced Technology and Projects Group, or ATAP. They basically carved out the strategic heart of the company and sold off the shell. And you don't have to take my word for it. This is straight from the top. Larry Page, the CEO, said it himself when they announced the sale. The mission was crystal clear. Keep the patents to defend Android and get back to focusing on the software ecosystem, not manufacturing hardware. It was the plan all along, right there in black and white. Okay, so the strategy makes perfect sense. But what about that $10 billion elephant in the room? This is where we get to do the fun part. As deal makers, this is where we need to look past the headlines and do the real math. Let's unpack the financial engineering here.
All right, so follow the money here. The sticker price was $12.5 billion, but Motorola had $3.2 billion in cash on its books and another $2.4 billion in tax assets Google could use. So boom, that brings the cost way down. Then Google sells off the set-top box business for over $2 billion and some factories for another $75 million. When you do all that math, the actual net cost for the patents and the hardware business was really only about $4.5 billion.
And here it is. This is the whole ballgame. The true net cost for these absolutely critical assets was around $4.5 billion. At the time, if you looked at independent valuations, the patent portfolio alone was estimated to be worth around $5.5 billion. So not only did Google not lose $10 billion, they've actually got a strategically vital asset for effectively less than it was worth. A masterclass.
You see, that kind of deep analysis, digging past the headlines to find the real math, is what makes or breaks a deal. Navigating these hidden layers of value is a very specific skill. If you're looking to bring that kind of deep insight to your next transaction to make sure you're capturing all the strategic upside, Vyas Tangatorti's M&A advisory services specializes in precisely that, finding the hidden value. You can check them out at www.services.corpdev.org. So the Google Motorola deal is more than just a great story. It's a living, breathing case study. It's just packed with incredible lessons for any of us working in corporate development, M&A, or private equity.
So what are the big lessons from this playbook? First, always dig past the headline price to find the true net cost. Second, understand when intangible assets, like these patents, are the real prize. Third, know that a planned sale on the back end isn't a failure. It can be the smartest move you make. And finally, remember that M&A isn't always about getting bigger. Sometimes the best deals are about making the entire ecosystem you rely on stronger and more stable.
And there's another layer to this that is just brilliant. When Google bought Motorola, it spooked its partners. Samsung, for example, started thinking, wait, is Google now my competitor? And they began working on their own OS. But by selling the hardware business, Google sent a clear signal. We're not competing with you. We're your partner. It was a masterful piece of political maneuvering to keep the whole Android family happy. What we've just walked through, this whole playbook, it actually has a name. It's called a strategic asset acquisition. It's the art of buying a whole company just to surgically extract one incredibly important piece and then selling off the rest. Every M&A pro should have this in their toolkit. And honestly, the Google Motorola deal is the poster child for how to do it right. So that brings us to today. Looking at the big tech deals happening right now, this story forces us to ask a really important question. Which of these acquisitions are we all misreading? Which ones aren't really about the obvious product, but are actually about some hidden strategic asset? Some IP, some team, some technology that will only become obvious years down the road. Now that's something to think about.